Have you ever wondered what it truly feels like to stand inches away from the raw, unbridled power of the living God while knowing that the slightest stumble, the smallest irreverence, or a single heartbeat of pride could result in your immediate end? Imagine a silence so heavy it rings in your ears, a stillness in your home so profound that the very air seems to vibrate with a holy electricity, and in the center of your living room sits a gold-overlaid chest that has already claimed the lives of thousands. Why did a king, a man after God's own heart, become so terrified of this object that he abandoned it on the doorstep of a stranger? And how did that stranger turn a death sentence into the greatest generational blessing in the history of Israel? Most people read the story of the Ark of the Covenant as a mere Sunday school lesson about a box, but tonight, we are peeling back the veil to uncover a hidden mystery of radical hospitality and the terrifying beauty of divine presence that is almost never preached from the pulpit. Stay with us until the very end, because the secret behind why Obed Edom's family was transformed in just 90 days holds the exact blueprint for how you can invite the weight of God's glory into your own broken home today. The air in the hills of Judah was thick with the scent of dust, sweat, and the metallic tang of fear. The year was a tumultuous one for the young King David, a season of transition where the throne was secure, but the spiritual heart of the nation was still wandering in the wilderness. For 20 years, the Ark of the Covenant, the footstool of the Almighty, the very throne of Yahweh on earth, had languished in the house of Abinadab, forgotten by a Saulite administration that sought power without presence. But David, fueled by a holy fire, had resolved to bring the glory back to the city of David. The procession was supposed to be a triumph, a cacophony of 30,000 chosen men, harps, lyres, and cymbals, shaking the very foundations of the earth. Yet, in one horrific, bone-chilling moment at the threshing floor of Nahon, the music stopped. The oxen stumbled. A man named Uzzah reached out a well-intentioned hand to steady the staggering ark, and in a flash of divine lightning, he fell dead. The celebration became a cemetery. The king's joy curdled into a paralyzing, breathless dread. David, the giant killer, the warrior poet, looked at the ark not as a blessing, but as a biological hazard of the soul. He was afraid of the Lord that day, and in his desperation to survive the presence of the holy, he looked for a place, any place, to deposit the danger. He looked for a man who had nothing to lose, or perhaps a man whose faith was sturdier than a king's crown. Enter Obed Edom, the Gittite. To the casual observer, he was an outsider, a man whose very name carried the echoes of Gath, the city of Goliath. He lived on the outskirts of the narrative, a humble gatekeeper whose life was defined by the quiet rhythms of the soil and the sanctuary. Imagine the scene as the dust settled from the chaotic retreat of David's army. The king of Israel knocks on your door, not to offer a reward, but to leave a crate of holy fire in your guest room, a chest that just killed one of his best men. Obed Edom stood there, perhaps wiping the dust of the fields from his brow, looking into the eyes of a trembling king. He saw the ark, draped in its blue cloths, carried by poles that no one dared touch. He knew the stories. He knew that this was the same ark that had toppled Dagon and plagued the Philistines with tumors. He knew that the Lord smote Uzzah there for his error, and there he died by the ark of God, as recorded in 2 Samuel 6-7. Any other man would have barricaded the door. Any other man would have pleaded for his life, citing the safety of his wife and his 8 sons. But Obed Edom did something that defies human logic and religious tradition. He opened the door. He invited the fire into his house. The internal world of Obed Edom during those first few hours must have been a crucible of psychological tension. Every footfall in his own home became a prayer. Every breath was an act of worship. He didn't have the luxury of a temple's thick curtains or the distance of a courtyard. The Shekinah was in his living quarters. We often view the holiness of God as a soft, ethereal glow, but for Obed Edom, it was a heavy, overwhelming weight. It was the kabod, the heavy glory. He was a man living on the edge of a volcano, yet he did not move with the frantic energy of fear. He moved with the meticulous care of love. This is the core struggle of the believer that we see mirrored in his life. The tension between the mysterium tremendum, the overwhelming mystery that makes us tremble, and the fascinans, the grace that draws us in. Obed Edom realized what David had forgotten, that God's presence is only dangerous to those who try to control it or treat it as common. While the rest of Israel watched from a distance, waiting for news of another funeral at the Gittite's house, Obed Edom was learning the secret language of the Spirit. He was discovering that the fire that consumes the proud is the same fire that warms the humble. Day after day, the sun rose over the hills of Gath Rimmon, and the neighbors waited for the scream, the flash, the tragedy. But the tragedy never came. Instead, something miraculous began to seep through the very walls of his home. Can you see it? The grain in his barn began to multiply without explanation. His livestock became unnaturally fertile, dropping twins and triplets in the fields. His 8 sons, rather than being terrified, began to exhibit a wisdom and a strength that surpassed their peers. His wife's countenance changed from the weariness of labor to the radiance of a queen. The Bible tells us in 2 Samuel 6, verse 11, that the ark of the Lord continued in the house of Obed Edom the Gittite 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed Edom and all his household. Think about the specificity of that time frame, 90 days. In just 3 months, the presence of God did for Obed Edom what 20 years of religion couldn't do for Abinadab. This is the cinematic turning point of our story, the realization that the ark wasn't a curse, it was a fountain. David was hiding in Jerusalem, paralyzed by a religious spirit that saw God as a capricious executioner, while Obed Edom was waking up every morning in a house where the very air tasted like Eden. The climax of this narrative isn't a battle or a grand speech. It is the moment word reaches the palace. Imagine a messenger running to David, breathless, his eyes wide with disbelief. "My king, you won't believe it. The man you left the ark with, he isn't dead. He's the most prosperous man in the kingdom. His crops are overflowing, his children are thriving, and there is a peace on his property that feels like the presence of angels." David's heart must have skipped a beat. The psychological shift was instantaneous. The fear that had kept him away was replaced by a holy jealousy. He realized that he had allowed his misunderstanding of God's character to rob him of God's company. But more importantly, we see the transformation of Dod-Herd, Obed Edom himself. When David finally came back to claim the ark, he didn't find a man relieved to be rid of a burden. He found a man who had become addicted to the glory. This is the shocking revelation that most commentators skip. Obed Edom didn't just let the ark go, he followed it. He was a Gittite, an outsider, but he couldn't go back to a life without the presence. He abandoned his lands, his successful farm, and his comfortable home to become a gatekeeper and a singer in the house of the Lord. He traded his status as a wealthy landowner to be a servant near the gold-overlaid chest. The deeper spiritual significance here connects directly to the person of Jesus Christ. Obed Edom's house became a prototype of the New Testament believer. In the Old Covenant, the ark was a localized presence, a keep-out sign to the common man. But through his faith and reverence, Obed Edom proved that God's primary desire is not to strike us down, but to dwell within our domestic spheres. This points us toward the incarnation, where the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. Jesus is the true ark, the one who carries the law, the manna, and the budding rod of authority within himself. Just as Obed Edom opened his home to the ark, we are called to open the doors of our hearts to a presence that the world deems dangerous. The hidden truth here is that many of us are like David. We want the benefits of the kingdom, but we are terrified of the king's proximity. We keep him at a distance because we've seen others die to their self-will, and it scares us. But the lesson of the Gittite is that the death of the self is the birth of the blessing. The very thing you are afraid to surrender to God is the very thing He wants to use to prosper your entire lineage. Consider the profound practical reality of this for your own life. Are you treating the presence of God like a museum piece or a house guest? We often relegate our spirituality to the threshing floors of Sunday morning, hoping God stays in his box so he doesn't disrupt our oxen or our plans. But Obed Edom teaches us that the blessing follows the hosting. He didn't just store the ark, he hosted it. To host the presence means to rearrange your life around his priorities. It means that when the ark moves into your home, you change how you speak to your spouse, how you handle your finances, and what you allow your eyes to see. The blessing of Obed Edom wasn't a magic trick. It was the natural byproduct of an environment that was aligned with heaven. If you feel like your crops are failing, if your relationships are barren, or your soul is dry, could it be that you've left the ark at the gate? Could it be that you've been watching the king's procession from afar instead of opening your front door to the holy? The story of Obed Edom also speaks to the power of generational legacy. When we look later in the books of Chronicles, we find the descendants of Obed Edom mentioned repeatedly. They weren't just random workers. They were described as able men for strength for the service. 1 Chronicles 26 verse 8 tells us there were 62 of them, all remarkable leaders. Your decision to host the presence of God in your living room today, to pray with your children, to seek his face in the quiet hours, to live with reverence, is not just about your 90 days of blessing. It is about the 62 descendants who will carry a strength for service because of the atmosphere you cultivated. You are building a spiritual infrastructure that will outlive your name. This is the prophetic weight of your private devotion. What you do in the secret place of your home when no one is watching but the Lord is what determines the public favor on your bloodline for centuries to come. As we look at the final chapters of this man's life, we see him standing at the gates of the tabernacle, his eyes fixed on the ark he once protected. He had seen the fire up close, and it hadn't consumed him, it had refined him. He is a testament to the fact that God is not looking for the most qualified, the most Jewish, or the most religious to carry his glory. He is looking for the most hungry. He is looking for the man or woman who says, even if it costs me my reputation, even if it feels dangerous to my comfort, I cannot live without him. The story of Obed Edom is a call to a radical, dangerous, beautiful intimacy. It is a reminder that the king is still looking for places to deposit his glory, and he often bypasses the palaces of the proud to find the humble homes of those who will simply say, yes. Tonight, as you reflect on this journey from the threshing floor to the palace gates, I want you to ask yourself, what am I afraid to let into my house? Is there a holy weight you've been avoiding because you're afraid of the change it will demand? Do not be like David in his moment of fear, missing out on the 3 months that could change everything. Be like the Gittite. Open the door, create a space for the divine in the middle of your ordinary mess. Let the neighbors wonder why your crops are suddenly green and why your spirit is finally at rest. The fire is not there to kill you. It is there to kill everything in you that is preventing you from living. Embrace the weight of the glory, for in that weight you will find the lightness of true grace. If this story of Obed Edom has stirred something deep in your spirit, if it has challenged you to stop keeping God at a distance and start hosting his presence in your daily life, then I invite you to join our community. We are a gathering of believers who are hungry for the deep truths of the Word, seeking to move beyond the surface and into the raw power of biblical narrative. Please hit that like button to help this message reach others who are living in fear of the fire, and subscribe to become part of our journey through the hidden corners of Scripture. Comment below with the phrase, "I will host the presence," and let us know how we can pray for your household to be blessed, just like the house of Obed Edom. Share this with someone who feels like they are in a season of 90 days where everything is at stake. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may his Shekinah glory rest upon your home tonight and forevermore.